Hi, my name is Cale. I'm a third year student at the University of Hartford, and I'm an extern here at Wesleyan's CAPS. And today I figured very timely would be to talk about kind of coping with election-related stress. As both of my fellow staff members have talked about, lots of stress going on in this moment throughout today and throughout some time. So it's important to kind of understand, how do we tackle that, and how do we navigate through that throughout the rest of today and the rest of the week, or just in general, especially related to the stress we face regarding the election. So the first thing that I would really like to hammer home is that you are not alone. A lot of people are reporting that the election is a big stressor for them. So mental health experts have been talking about how people are feeling especially stressed about this year's election, compounded by things like COVID-19, civil rights issues, Supreme Court changes, other changes happening. And a study actually found that 68% of people or respondents said that the election was a big source of stress for them, which is a big increase from the previous election. Around the same time in 2016, it was around 52%. So people are feeling particularly stressed. And the CDC also kind of reported that the highest rising levels of anxiety this year were among young adults, as well as Black and Latino people of all ages, kind of experiencing throughout this election process. But then also the prevalence of anxiety symptoms among all populations was about 3 times higher in the same time period now than it was in 2019. So lots of stress and anxiety happening. Here are a couple kind of charts from things. So it tells you from each party, still lots of distress on both sides regarding the election. And then a lot of patients, as I had mentioned earlier, kind of the 78% of patients reporting, I'm pretty concerned. So again, to hammer this point, this is a thing that many of us are experiencing, and it's not an isolated issue. So let's talk a little bit about stress and anxiety. So stress is a response to an emotional or physical kind of tension that responds to an external cause. So we experience something like an ongoing election, and we feel this stress kind of put on us. And then we have anxiety, which is an internal feeling of kind of fear or apprehension about what is coming up. Now, to kind of be fair, when we think about anxiety, oftentimes we don't like that. We think no, but anxiety is not necessarily inherently a good or a bad thing. Anxiety can be very helpful, right? I mean, it helps us kind of survive as a species. We do things that make us productive or respond to danger, right? We might get anxious about seeing a fire, so it motivates us to run away from the fire. But it can also do things like reinforce us to socialize and get involved in things. And it can be really productive and helpful for us to be concerned about certain things. But when it becomes kind of a problem is when it becomes excessive or overwhelming. And then it can become unproductive because we're kind of stuck. We're stuck in the cycle of not being able to get out of the stress or anxiety. And then we might be actually doing things that make us more stressed or anxious, especially during kind of an election period where there's lots of information being thrown at us, and it's kind of hard to navigate where do we kind of allow ourselves to be and take time away as we are feeling stressed and anxious. And so on top of, kind of just feeling the stress, it can cause kind of difficulties, right? And I'm sure many people who kind of have been feeling the stress, and many of you in here might have been feeling kind of physical or emotional stressors or sensations, right? Things like tension headaches or stomach aches, maybe nausea, difficulty sleeping, kind of pounding heart, fatigue, other things like that. And it can also suppress the immune system, right? When we're really, really stressed, the immune system can kind of take a dive, which is especially relevant, right, during a pandemic where, and that adds to the stress. There's lots of stress. But then also emotionally, right? We might feel overwhelmed or confused. What do we think about what's going to happen? Or might we feel really sad about what's happening, or irritable. Might be hard to concentrate on things that we want to focus on because there's kind of this thing going on around us that makes it hard to focus on other things. And even sometimes existentially, we think like, oh, what does this mean about my life or my future or things like that? And so these are things that stress can kind of compound and we can get stuck in, especially during kind of a controversial election period. But what's important here is to kind of focus on wellness. And so this is one way to view wellness. This is something called the wellness wheel, which describes the kind of integration of 7 important dimensions of wellness. Now, there are other wellness wheels that might have different numbers of dimensions or different kind of names for the dimensions. But this one has 7, and that is emotional wellness, environmental wellness, intellectual wellness, social wellness, physical wellness, spiritual wellness, and occupational wellness. And in no particular order, each one is kind of its own and they all intersect with each other. So one is not necessarily more important than the other. So just to get a sense a little bit about what each of these really mean. So emotional wellness is just kind of understanding your feelings and expressing emotions in a constructive way. Being able to kind of manage and cope with stress and life's challenges as they come. And then environmental wellness. So kind of considering interactions between your environment, your community, and yourself. And the environment doesn't necessarily just mean the natural environment, but also your social environment, and also the environment within you, right? What is the environment outside of me and within me? But then also intellectual wellness. So kind of engaging your intellectual abilities and your creative skills and your knowledge about things, and imparting knowledge to other people. Occupational or professional wellness is kind of, finding fulfillment from your work. What kinds of things do you offer and things that you do that make you feel fulfilled kind of in your professional or occupational kind of experiences, and expanding those skills and strengths. And then physical wellness, kind of building up kind of your body and your health in a more physical body sense. So health and safety and practicing actions that support that. And then social wellness, like quality of your relationships, interacting with other people, having supports, and understanding kind of how you interact with others in ways that might be harmful to you, but also that lift you up at the same time. And then spiritual wellness, kind of referring to having your values or beliefs and understanding what those values and beliefs may be, and engaging in living in ways that that are in line with those values and that make you feel good about kind of what you're doing in life. And I think the most important thing to remember about wellness is it's not the absence of an illness or the absence of stress or anything like that. Because stress and illness or just emotional or kind of life difficulties are just something we're going to experience as people. It's something that's always going to come, and that's just kind of how life is. But it's more about having a lifelong process of kind of making the decisions to live a more balanced and meaningful life, to foster yourself in spite of dealing with stress and dealing with difficulties that we face. And so there are always opportunities for enhancing kind of your wellness, even if it's in very small ways. It doesn't have to be something huge every single time that we try to engage in building our wellness. And I also want to remind you that it is not required and it's unrealistic to think I'm going to build all of these pieces of wellness up all at the same time and they're all going to be the max perfectly. Sometimes we might fluctuate on the same one within a day. We might feel really good emotionally, and maybe our emotional wellness dips for a day or two, and we focus on maybe some intellectual wellness because we're really studying for a test or something, or environmental wellness because we're really worried about kind of the election. And sometimes we have to it's an ebb and flow of how we interact with each of these areas of wellness. So it's okay if not every area of wellness is maxed out to the full all the time. So the first step is, I say the first step, but in this presentation, but in general, we think about kind of emotional wellness is I think the one that most people are focusing on a lot, because we're feeling really stressed, we're feeling really overwhelmed or sad or nervous because change is coming in some way, shape, or form. But it's important to, as part of emotional wellness, is to have a self-care plan and take care of yourself and engage in things that, either moving towards the election related material or political material, if you feel getting involved works for you and that's part of your self-care, or taking time to focus on other things in your life that you care about. And a self-care plan can look like this. This is just one way that a self-care plan can look. It's not a be-all end-all self-care plan or self-care self-care reflection, right? And you can see I put each of the pieces or the parts of the wellness wheel in here, and it asks you, like, okay, what are some things I'm currently doing? What are some things that I enjoy or do in each of these areas that are building up my wellness in this area? And just doing that might give you a sense of, oh, okay, maybe I'm not paying attention so much to my spiritual wellness, this week or day or month, whatever it is that you feel or notice. Or maybe I'm doing a really good job with my intellectual wellness, and I realize I want to build up a different one. I want to work on a different one. Then there's, you can think about practices you want to try. What are some things that, you like, or things that you think might help build up a little bit of your kind of needs to maybe de-stress or get involved or whatever that may be? How do we kind of go about, like, ooh, what do I want to try, and what have I tried? And so once you kind of recognize those things and are able to look at, okay, these are some things I do for self-care and things that I can do for self-care. It also might be important, especially when dealing with an election, because there's an outcome at some point, to have a plan of, okay, what do I do when I'm stressed about the outcome? Or even if the outcome is what I want, what do I do if I still want to feel some relief, if I'm still feeling a little bit stressed, regardless of the outcome? You could have an emergency self-care plan. And again, this is just one option of what it could look like. Just something about, what are some self-care tools that I can use? So, it's hard sometimes when we're feeling really overwhelmed to immediately have this plan in place and come up with this plan in our heads, because a lot of our energy is focused on the crisis or the stress that we're facing. So it's important to kind of have a sense of, what are some things in regarding maybe some of these areas like mood, resilience, social support. It could be other areas that you feel comfortable putting on your chart. But what do I do? What is helpful, or what do I know is helpful? What have I tried that does help me? And what are some things to avoid, right? So, for example, maybe we say, what's really helpful for me when I'm feeling really stressed about the election is I go talk to my best friend about, something that I enjoy or something that we enjoyed together, to kind of help me decompress and take my mind off some things. And maybe something that I know is harmful for me to do during that time is to, I check the news a lot and then I get really overwhelmed. And so I can remind myself, okay, these are some things that I know that maybe haven't made me feel so good. And I can try to engage in something else that might be those helpful, or what to-dos, kind of to help us have something in the back of our heads. And just so that we know, we could always pull it out and be like, okay, shoot, I can't think of all these things. What do I have that might be able to help me right now? And once you kind of have those plans, or even before you have those plans, I think it's just important to recognize what you're feeling about the election. You know, kind of acknowledging, what am I feeling? Am I feeling concern? Am I feeling anxiety? Am I feeling sad? And acknowledge whatever it is that you feel. We might be a mix of emotions, or things. Sometimes we don't take the time to take a minute to just assess, where am I in this moment? What am I feeling right now about this? Because there's lots going on. And it's also important to remember that sometimes, I think, regardless of how we're feeling about the election, we might be thinking about the last election and what that felt like. And if you are remembering that or replaying that in your mind, rather than trying to push that out of mind or push any of these kind of negative experiences or feelings out of mind, to allow yourself to just feel what you're feeling. Just kind of give yourself that positive self-talk and that permission to say, this is what I'm feeling at this time. And it's okay to be feeling what it is I'm feeling. And, once we kind of have these, the self-care plan can come in handy, right? I'm feeling this way. Okay, what can I do to help? I encourage people to make an enjoyable activity for the week of the election. It could be the day of, the day after, or multiple days, because it can help kind of remind us that there are still enjoyable things that we can do and we can control. And it's important to focus on what we can control, right? We might not be able to change the election results or make the election go faster like we might want it to kind of get through it. But what we can do is focus on, what can I do? Can I plan a good activity for me to do today? Can I, it can even be simpler, right? It could be, can I do the things that I can control today, like getting out of bed and brushing my teeth, or going to class today, or calling my mom or dad or whoever it is that I wanted to call today. Like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be something so big, like I'm gonna fix my problem today and tackle all of these issues. It can be something simple as just, I'm gonna do something I normally do today, like I do it, to help kind of get us through a little bit. And then there's also kind of communication skills, right? Part of that social wellness, you'll see the integration in some parts is, communicating how you're feeling about the election and about other kind of things related to the election, to other people and to yourself, is a really important part of emotional wellness, to be able to have that support, and foster that support. And we'll talk about communication skills in a little. So now moving to social wellness, like we talked about, reaching out to family and friends. Who are those people that you can kind of reach out to? That might be part of your safety plan, right? Is having, I'm going to call this person, or maybe talk to this person, and reaching out to those. And I also do appreciate the fact that maybe we don't have many supportive friends or family around. Maybe they have differing beliefs than us. Maybe we're not so sure if we want to talk to them. But there are also places where we can reach out to maybe professionals or other services and resources. For example, reaching out to here at CAPS to talk to a clinician, like Angie had mentioned earlier. And there are other resources that I'll share at the end. For example, crisis text line, which is 741-741. You can talk to a trained crisis counselor about these issues. And they expect that these issues will come up, and they have been kind of trained to talk about these and how to help people through. And that's part of social wellness, is connecting to other people to kind of help us support ourselves. And that's part of respecting the needs and wants of yourself, but also the needs and wants of others. So not only being conscious of what do I need, but also being conscious of what does the other person maybe that I care about need. Maybe I really need to talk about election-related material, but maybe they need to take a break, and respecting that need of theirs while finding an outlet for you as well. Just things to consider about other people's wellness as well, because we're all trying to figure out kind of how to manage our wellness during this time. And then another big important part of social wellness can be getting involved with groups or clubs or organizations, etc., that you really enjoy, or that are related to causes. If you're feeling like I need some time to decompress from the election, it could be as simple as going to your knitting club or your D&D club, or whatever that is that you enjoy, soccer team, other kind of just activities or organizations, or just people that you enjoy. And I also appreciate some of you may be stressed because you want to engage more with election-related material. And if that makes you feel less stressed, or if that boosts your area of wellness to engage a little bit more, you can enjoy and engage in those organizations or clubs or activities related to causes you care about, maybe, especially regarding kind of political or election-related material. Those are things that are okay. It's okay to move toward or move away from if we feel we need some time to do either. And it might fluctuate, like I said earlier, it might fluctuate from day to day, how we feel we might want to kind of boost our wellness in that day. And what I do want to point out, though, is if you feel like voting is enough, or you want to really get engaged, but it seems really overwhelming, try to determine the smallest or the easiest possible thing that you can do. Sometimes trying to get involved can seem very overwhelming because there are a lot of things that we can do, but they also might be very hard to do. It might be important to just pick the easiest thing and start there. That can boost our wellness a little bit, just give us a sense of, okay, we're starting to engage, but also not make us feel like we got to tackle the whole thing. And that also might help us maybe feel like we can take on more if we decide that that is something that we value later on. So these communication skills that I was talking about, okay, how do we handle maybe some of these election related conversations that are going to come up or already have come up, I'm sure, between people that you know. And so there's some difficulties, right, dealing with these differences of opinion. So some causes of conflict, right? So either there's a lack of communication where we're not really hearing each other, value conflicts where we're making differences kind of in attitudes or beliefs or values about things going on. Conflict can come from, change and transition. Destructive patterns where, we're trying to get over the person or we're trying to fight the person rather than kind of understand. And then distorted beliefs about conflict, like, oh, this isn't, conflict is abnormal, or disagreement, we're not allowed to disagree. And these are all very relevant during an election time, right? We feel like people might not be communicating. We feel like there are different values, change is happening. People might be trying to fight each other on things. And these are the kind of some of the causes that bring this about. So on top of those causes, everybody also has different communication styles that can come out when we're talking about some of these things. Like assertive communication is what we strive for, right? It's the ability to kind of clearly express your needs without really violating the other person's rights, and trying to, express what your needs are and get your needs met without feeling like you have to not be able to get those needs met, to just agree with the other person or to give your own needs up for the other person just because. But other people sometimes can be aggressive, right? We've seen, needs are really expressed really loudly over the other person's needs, and it can be threatening or domineering. And then communication can also be passive, right? We could just kind of I'll just do whatever the person says, or I just won't engage or won't really kind of talk, and I'll just give up my own needs. But there's also a mixture, that passive aggression, right? Where we might not be seeming like we're being aggressive on the surface, but we're doing passive things that insinuate some sort of aggression. And we're going to see all these kind of styles come out throughout, an election period when people are discussing difficult, controversial issues. But what I really want to hammer home is when we're thinking about the conversations that we're having, before you begin a conversation, because sometimes it can become very easy to get pulled toward the conversation and to get wrapped up into the conversation. It's important to consider whether you feel it's particularly worth it, right? So if it's a really good friend, maybe asking questions like, do I think that it's going to help our relationship? Or do I think I'm going into this to learn about the person and understand the person? Am I willing to spend the time and energy on it? We might be just really tired. We might be really jaded. We might need some time to decompress. Are we willing to get started, and are we willing to get through that? And have you chosen the right place and time? Is this the appropriate setting to do this? Is it the right time? Those are things to kind of consider before we jump in. But if you feel comfortable with all those questions and you feel that the answer is yes, you could definitely continue with trying to go through the conversation. But that may change throughout the conversation as well. So part of kind of starting this communication is through active listening skills. We're going to have a lot of people telling us a lot of different things about the election, about candidates, about political things going on today and the upcoming days. But practicing active listening can really help us understand what the person is saying and help us kind of take ourselves or remove ourselves feeling personally kind of attacked from it sometimes. It's more about kind of understanding rather than judging what's happening. So the first step is really just, okay, let's just pay attention. So how do we do that, right? We give the speaker our attention as much as we can and acknowledge what they're saying. We also recognize kind of nonverbal communication. So what is their body language saying? Are their eyebrows furrowed? Are they concerned? Are they angry? Are their arms crossed and they are very closed? Are their, shoulders dragging and they seem really sad? Look at the speaker directly when you're talking to them, but also notice the body language and kind of get a gauge of where are they right now in this conversation. And I think the biggest thing also is to not mentally prepare a rebuttal. I know that I struggle with this. It's something hard to do, but try to spend your energy understanding what the person's saying, because the more that we're mentally preparing a rebuttal, the less we're actually listening. If we're spending 10 seconds in our head saying, "Oh, I got this great point to bring up," but we're not listening to the person, we missed a whole 10 seconds of information that person just tried to convey to us. So it's important to kind of keep a sense. And on here it says, don't get distracted by your thoughts, or don't get distracted by environmental factors. And what I think is important about that, it's not, oh my God, it's bad if you got distracted, because distraction happens. Distraction can happen throughout the whole time. So it's important to just recognize when you're distracted and then bring yourself back to the conversation. Then we want to show that we're listening. Use your body language. Convey what you're saying or what you're feeling through your body language. Show that you're engaged and attentive. You might nod occasionally or smile if appropriate. Obviously, if someone's telling us something incredibly sad, we might not want to smile. That wouldn't be, I think, the appropriate reaction. But keep your face kind of interested and engaged, and an open posture. And you can encourage people to continue and showing that you're listening, by saying like, oh, okay, like, oh, things like that. And then also kind of providing feedback, right? So reflect on what's been said. So if someone said something to you, and even if you know for sure, or you're a little bit not sure, you can say, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is this, or it sounds like you're saying this. And those are great, because you can also help kind of clarify the question, right? Sometimes people say things and we kind of gloss over the fact that maybe I didn't quite understand what they were saying, or maybe I'm a little bit confused. But we can simply ask, what did you mean when you said that? Help me kind of understand. Or is this what you mean? Because that's what I was thinking. And that kind of summarizing the person's comments periodically kind of helps keep that flow. And I will say, if you find yourself responding emotionally, because sometimes these conversations are emotional, if you do find yourself responding emotionally, you can kind of say so and ask for more information. Depending on kind of the speaker's response, you could say, I find that I am getting a little upset by what you said, because it sounded like you were saying this. Is that what you meant? Help make sure that I'm getting the right message here. Because that could, if we misunderstood the message, that could clear things up, and the conversation can go in a much different direction than if we had just kind of glossed over that, or just assumed that was what they meant. Then also deferring judgment, which is very hard. And I know that people, and I want to say that these skills are skills to learn. It's something that we practice and improve on over time. But it's hard sometimes to reserve judgment. But it's important to try our best to listen to the message and try to allow the speaker to finish the point, allow us to understand the message, and try not to interrupt the message, so that we can really get a sense of what's happening, and try not to be like the judgment cat who is very disapproving and angry. And then we want to respond appropriately, right? And so what does that mean? So we want to really encourage and respect understanding while we're gaining information, and kind of being candid and open and honest in your responses. And a big thing is treating the other person how he or she would want to be treated. Now, I say that meaning, I notice I didn't say how you want to be treated, because other people might want to be treated in different ways. For example, if somebody is feeling really sad during a conversation and the response is, oh, that really sucks, I'm sorry, that might not go over well with me, but maybe for your best friend that works just fine. Use these active listening skills to gather information and see, oh, okay, maybe this would be a better way to respond. And again, things that we practice to kind of help us get more attentive and be able to understand the message and remove ourselves a little bit emotionally from what we're hearing and having a conversation about. So even if you're like SpongeBob and you're internally like, try to kind of encourage that respect and understanding throughout the process if you can. Now, I know that many of us, even if we practice perfect active listening skills and we're very respectful, the other person is not always going to be respectful. Sometimes we run into people in our lives that are just really upset and want to convey that. And a good way to kind of go about this is, okay, so we start by practicing our active listening skills that can help us understand the person. But it's important then to we can pause and take a break before responding. That pausing and that breathing can really just give us a moment to, one, recognize, okay, I'm feeling upset. What is it that makes me upset about this? And that information can be helpful to understand, this is why I'm getting upset and this is how it might be influencing my responses. But it also gives you time to take a minute to say, okay, this is how I want to convey my message, rather than responding immediately and responding back at the same level that the other person might be responding, because we have a tendency to match the other person when we're in a conversation. So if they're really loud and energetic, we might become really loud and energetic. We want to kind of remain calm and take a moment if we need to. And you might even say, you know, let me just take a minute and let me think about how I want to respond. And that's okay. We also want to kind of respond to the words, right? Not the tone. So we talked about, like, even if the person is being really maybe aggressive side or passive aggressive, we want to respond to what the actual message is rather than how they're given the message. Addressing how they're given the message might be a different conversation, but if we want to understand the message, that's where we might have to focus at this point in time. And you could also ask for helpful feedback, right? So if the person says something like, you know, your argument about this election issue was really poorly organized, it was bad, we could ask questions like, okay, so I'm hearing you use your reflection and saying, you know, I'm hearing, or it sounds like you're saying that wasn't very clear. You know, how could I make that clear for you? Or what wasn't so clear? Maybe I can help make it more clear for you. Because sometimes that sheds light on how we can maybe improve the communication, but also help the other person understand what's happening or what we're trying to convey, and take the conversation in a different way. And also taking kind of the person's perspective and trying to think, okay, understanding this person. Sometimes really harsh criticism or aggression can be a reflection of what the person is dealing with, rather than, oh, you're the problem. So trying to get a sense and using your active listening skills and gathering information to really say, you know what, okay, maybe this is about something else and it's not necessarily about me. And that can sometimes remove us a little bit from feeling personally attacked when we're talking about really kind of controversial or heated issues, especially related to an election. And you can also disagree. Disagreeing is perfectly fine. And we'll talk about how to kind of say no or disagree or in a conversation. And you always have the right to remove yourself from the situation and take care of yourself. Like this little Kermit here, you might need to take time for yourself and calm down, and it might take a while, and that's okay. It's okay to take care of your right to say, you know what, I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I just need a minute to decompress, or I need 30 minutes to decompress, or however much time it is that you feel you need to collect yourself and approach the conversation again if you want to approach the conversation again, and that's okay. But I also appreciate that we can't always leave the situation, right? Sometimes we're around family or friends that kind of make us feel like we have to stay in the situation, or they make us stay in the situation. But you have the right to say no and take personal time and space and assert your wellness for, you know, your emotional wellness, your social wellness, by saying, no, I am not going to continue. So how do we kind of respond with no's? How do we say no to people? So the first is the direct no, being like, I'm not going to do that. So say in this example, we're having an argument with a close family member of ours, and they really want us to keep going, and we are not feeling comfortable. You're not feeling comfortable continuing. So we could just simply say, if possible, I can't continue. I'm not going to continue. Now that's the most direct, right? Sometimes that doesn't always work. There's also the reflecting no, where we say, you know, we acknowledge the content. We acknowledge what the person's saying, but then assertively refuse. So you say, look, I understand that you really want me to continue, but I don't think I can right now. So I'm gonna stop. And then on top of that, kind of in addition to that, there's the reflecting no, where we say, you know, this is when you acknowledge the content and you acknowledge that they are requesting you to do something, but then you refuse still at the end. And you say, you know, but you also provide an honest reason. on top of that, the reason for why. So saying something like, I know that you really want me to continue this conversation. And I know that that's something important to you, but I'm really overwhelmed right now. And I need a minute to calm down. I don't feel like the conversation's going to go anywhere if I'm not feeling capable, right? And then the rain check no, which is doing those previous forms of no, but then saying, maybe we could do it a different time, saying, I know that you really want me to continue with this conversation, but I'm really overwhelmed and I don't feel like I'm capable of continuing in a positive manner. How about we do it in 2 hours? Or how about we do it tomorrow? Maybe we can continue tomorrow when I've calmed down. And then I would advise you, though, only do that one if you really mean that you're going to continue, or that you really want to continue, because you don't want to encourage someone that you're going to have a conversation and then say, nope, not doing that conversation. It can make things a little difficult. And then the inquiring no, it's not necessarily that you're kind of using the same techniques as before, but you might pull in a third party, right? You might say, I don't think I can right now, but this person knows a lot about it. What are your thoughts? And you can pull them in. Or you can do, a resource. It's like, maybe I'm not able to, but this website or this resource I know has information about this. So maybe we could use that. Now, before pulling someone else in, make sure that the other person would be comfortable doing so. Don't just snag a random person to kind of fill in the difficult conversation for you. Kind of make sure that it's somebody that is comfortable doing so, or point them in the direction of a resource. And then if all else fails, the broken record no can be a very powerful tool. And it's basically just repeating that you're not going to do something. So, using the reflections and saying, like, I'm sorry, I can't do this because I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Person asks you to continue going. I know that you said that, and I appreciate that you want to continue, but I'm really not feeling it. Person asks you again, and so forth. And eventually, usually, the person realizes that you're not going to just continue the conversation and you're just going to keep saying no and keeping them in circles. And usually they kind of come down. And these are some ways to say no that might be helpful. If you are stuck in a situation and you feel like you cannot continue kind of talking about relaxation-related material or engaging in a relaxation-related kind of event or kind of activity. So, and regarding intellectual and professional wellness, you can also attend conferences and programs about things you care about, right? Use your talents and skills. Listen to other people's perspectives. Really use what you know and learn, and use what you do in your life to support the things that you care about. And again, if you don't want to engage in election-related material because we're feeling really overwhelmed, do something you enjoy. Try a new activity. Learn about something new that you might be interested in. And this requires balancing school, work, engagement in those things, and leisure, which requires a little bit of time management skills. Now, I won't go into a whole bunch of time management skills, but one thing I can say is to kind of, if to-do lists work for you and it makes you feel like that increases your wellness and organization, absolutely, that's fine. But if you feel like to-do lists are too overwhelming or not working well, let's get rid of the to-do list, right? And reform it into something else. So a potential thing could be, instead of having this whole list of things that you have to do throughout the day that really don't have a lot of prioritization, pick your top 3 things. Maybe it's, going and volunteering at the polls if that's something that you wanted to do. Or maybe it's, engaging in a self-care activity plan. Or maybe it's, I've got to, write a paper today that I want to write and get done. And that will make me feel a little bit better today and take me away from some of this other kind of election-related stuff that I've been thinking about. And you want to kind of break down each of those top 3 that you really care about for today. Break down those and then assign kind of, what are the steps I take? What are the deadlines for this? And once you have the smaller pieces, it's easy to see the progress and work up to the big goal rather than just having this big block of a goal or a big block of like a ton of goals, and then it becomes quite overwhelming. And you can organize it in whatever way works well for you. Colors, Post-its, If you like to draw it out, journal it out, whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable and organized, these are ways to kind of prioritize how I'm going to handle things throughout my day, election related or other self-care related, that can be important to you. And especially a big one that I think all of us struggle with is unplugging like the little sloth here. Constantly checking the news and the material related to the election can really just compound the stress because we're just checking and checking and checking and nothing's really changing too much and we have no control. So an important thing that we can do is try to set some boundaries, right? Set an alarm maybe once or twice a day to check the news for maybe 15 minutes. And while you're checking, look for balanced and factual kind of information when you're checking, right? There's a ton of information out there. Try to find ones that, ask yourself about the information. Is the material reading helpful? Is it helpful for me to know this? Does it really not do anything for me, or does it make it worse? Is it something I can control? Okay, here are the results right now. Can I control that? How long do I have to look at that? And then, is it real? Is it unbiased? Does it come from a good source? Is it written by people who have very particular views and is not a very balanced kind of article or whatever it is? If the answer is no to any of these questions, give yourself permission to move on from that piece of information and move on to the next one that you might be interested in reading or watching or whatever that is. Sometimes we just get stuck on that one piece of information and then we start to get really anxious and we can't get out. And I will encourage you to avoid checking the news right before bed and avoid checking the news first thing in the morning. I know that is probably the hardest thing to do because we are very curious, but that can really affect your sleep. And it can also affect how you go about your day in the morning or getting out of bed in the morning. And we really, as part of our physical wellness, is kind of getting good sleep, which we'll talk about like right now. So getting good sleep habits, right? So being consistent, going to bed at a good time, getting up in the morning at a good time or at a consistent time, making sure your bedroom's dark, there are no distractions or loud noises. The hard one, I know for everybody, is removing the electronic devices, not checking the election-related material before bed, but also try not to look at your phone an hour before bed. If you can't do an hour, 30 minutes is okay too. Try to remove kind of just looking at your phone 30 minutes before bed so that you can sleep a little bit better. We want to avoid like really large meals, caffeine, alcohol before bed. Those are all things that can affect our sleep. And also kind of, getting regular exercise can also promote our sleep. And so regarding exercise, even just 30 minutes of walking briskly outside can kind of help your cardiovascular health, your respiratory health, improve your immune system, which is really important during this time. And it can kind of buffer and reduce your risk of depression and anxiety, which are things that people are experiencing right now throughout the election, and help you sleep better. So it's all tied. And then kind of eating regularly kind of helps boost your metabolism. It can keep you energized, encourage your kind of self-control, create a regular routine, and all of those kinds of things. And that can boost your emotional wellness, right? It can also, by doing these things, boost your social wellness, your intellectual wellness, because you're getting more sleep and you're being able to think more and focus more. And they're all tied together and can really kind of benefit you to focus on some of these areas. So like healthy body, healthy mind, happy human. And then we have spiritual wellness, where we kind of reflect on our values and we behave in ways that are congruent with those values. So if we really value openness and respect, maybe we engage in organizations or talk to people with openness and respect. And if we're not sure what our values are, maybe we can do a values exploration. There is a values exploration in the handout that you'll see at the end that they'll send out. A lot of these skills are in those handouts to review if you need them. And so what you could do is, using that list, there are actually, if you have values in mind that you know of, you can write those down. Or if you need help, there's a list that might be able to jog your memory of some or spark some ideas for you. And you can group them up into, I would say, like a maximum of 5 groups so that it's not too overwhelming. And then in each of those groups, pick one in each group that kind of speaks for the whole group. And that could give you a good sense of, man, what are my values in life and what do I care about? And you can actually use those values to help you create your self-care plan. and to help you kind of engage in other areas of wellness, like social wellness, intellectual wellness, physical wellness, all those different areas, so that you can kind of say, this is what I care about, and this is what I'm going to do to help me foster that today, the next day, whatever that is. And if you are religious, because spiritual wellness is not just religiousness, but it can be. If you are religious, you can participate in your community, kind of talk to members of your community, heads of your religious community for support and guidance, reflection on your experiences as a religious and spiritual member, and how you feel about the election based on that. And then there's also mindfulness practice as part of spiritual wellness. Now, given that it is 12:52 for purposes of time, I don't know if we'll do a mindfulness practice, but I'll kind of explain a little bit about mindfulness and what that might look like. And I'll provide you with, in the handout, there's a script, but I can also provide in the chat a video that I very much enjoy for mindfulness that you can try on your own, and it's guided, so you have someone kind of walking you through it. So mindfulness is really, it really talks about how emotional stress, is a natural part of life, and it can cause kind of physical tension or discomfort. It can cause emotional discomfort. We feel it in our head, our neck, our shoulders, our legs, everywhere. And discomfort is really a natural response to our feelings. It's okay if it's uncomfortable, because we have uncomfortable experiences. And we often try to control or avoid or escape or minimize those kind of emotional experiences because we don't like them. They feel uncomfortable. But the point of mindfulness is not necessarily to try to use any of those techniques and try to grasp them and say, no, I'm not going to feel or experience this. It's to just recognize, what am I feeling? Where do I feel it? Where do I feel this discomfort emotionally or physically? What does it feel like? Does it have a shape in my body? Does it move around? Does it stay in one place? And we really do this while breathing. And the breath is really an kind of anchoring part of us that never goes away. And it's something that we can kind of focus on. And by doing this kind of recognition and by doing this mindfulness, where we just kind of notice what we're experiencing, it can help us understand what our discomfort's trying to tell us, and then what we might want to do with that information to kind of live our values out, like we were talking about. So we won't do the mindfulness because of time, and I want to make sure there's time for questions. But this is the link. I'll have it posted in the chat, and there's also a mindfulness exercise in the handouts that I will send out. But I encourage you to try this and see what comes up for you, and just notice if it's difficult, because it may be difficult. You might feel a lot, you might feel a little, you might feel nothing while doing it, or experience very little while doing it. Just notice what that was like for you to experience as you were going through it. And then the last sense of wellness is environmental wellness, right? So really, by fostering all these other areas that we've talked about, you're already fostering environmental wellness, right? Both internal and external. So, we're improving our body and our mind, so you feel well enough to engage in election-related things, or engage in self-care things that you also care about throughout in your life. You're exploring your experiences to kind of understand yourself and your values and how you want to live. And what does that mean during an election time? How do I want to live and do things during an election period, and tackle those issues? And also communicating effectively with others and with yourself about kind of either hurtful behaviors that other people are doing in your community, or just kind of about how you feel or about how they feel about the election and about political things going on, so that people feel supported or understood, and you feel supported and understood during this time. But then also actually getting involved in the external community, right? Getting involved in clubs, organizations, things around you that kind of lift others up and make you feel like you're part of something, and make you feel kind of like you're expanding your areas of social and intellectual and occupational wellness by living out these experiences that are part of what you value. And then, really fostering that community and that environment in yourself and outside, that supports your well-being and others' well-being at the same time. And that is crucial in a time where people feel very divided and people feel very overwhelmed by controversial election material. Is really coming together and supporting each other and supporting ourselves as we need it. So overall, I would love for everybody during today and the days coming to really just take care of yourself as best as you can. Practice some of the techniques and skills or other things that we've talked about in this presentation. That'll be a lot of that is in the handouts, and use some of these resources if you need them. Things like CAPS on Call, where you can talk to a clinician here at CAPS, 8 to 8 peer listening and referral service, where you can talk to peers. It's a student-led kind of organization. So if you're not comfortable talking to a full professional, that's totally fine. And the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, if you're having any thoughts of suicide or if you know of anybody having thoughts of suicide. Also crisis text line, as I mentioned before, where you can talk with a trained crisis counselor anywhere in the US, I think a couple of other countries like Canada, and it's free, it's confidential, and they're there to kind of help you through this time and other difficulties related to the election and outside of the election. And then there are also free mindfulness apps like Insight Timer or Waking Up. They don't require you to pay for anything. I use Insight Timer. I like that one a lot. And there are also mindfulness experiences that you can find on YouTube or other websites, calm.com, things like that. If you wanted to engage in some emotional, spiritual kind of wellness where you're able to just take a minute to decompress and notice what's coming up for you. So with that said, take care of yourself this election day and the coming days, and thank you. And if there are questions, we can talk about